And the head bone's connected to the neck bone, and the neck bone's connected to the collarbone, and the collarbone's connected to the arm bone. If you're wondering how I know this song, it's because I used to be a doctor. No, it's a great song that teaches kids incorrectly about the bones in the body, and I just thought to sing it to you because a motherboard is that big thing when we open the case and look inside a computer. It's that big, pretty, multicolored board that is connecting all of the internal components together. It's also making things accessible on the outside of the computer for us so that we can plug things in. As you might guess, it is an extremely important component inside the computer, and we're going to dissect them together in this nugget. So I've noticed that PCs come in many different shapes and sizes, so it seems to me that motherboards must come in many different shapes and sizes, and that's exactly what happens. Here I've got three shown for you. On the left, we can see a standard ATX type motherboard. Then we can see a micro ATX type. Then we can see a mini ITX type. I didn't bother to show you a standard ITX type because you get the idea here. There's going to be various sizes of these different types of motherboards, and there's going to be various numbers of slots and things that they can do for us. You want to be really careful, obviously, if you're purchasing a motherboard in order to build your own PC, literally from scratch, because you want to make sure the motherboard you're getting is going to fit the case and all of the components that you plan on adding to that particular PC. And when you look at all these different motherboards that I've shown here, you notice something right away that's in common, and that's these slots that appear in the motherboard. Notice as we get smaller with the motherboards, we get fewer of those slots. These are called PCI expansion slots, and there is going to be a nugget dedicated to these things in this particular course. So check it out. It's the PC expansion card nugget. There turns out to be many different types of these slots. For instance, there's standard PCI, there's PCI-X, there's PCIe, there's mini PCI. So this is another big deal for us when we're shopping for our PC, how many and what types of expansion slots there are, because we may need to add a whole bunch of peripherals that connect to these expansion slots. Now don't get confused when you're looking at your motherboard, because there's some other slots on the motherboard, and at first glance these might look like PCI slots, but then you notice something interesting. These slots don't meet the back of the PC, so they're not going to give you ports on the back of the PC like the expansion cards do. No, you also notice there's these little clips on each end of these slots. This is to lock in place what you put inside. What do you put inside here? This is where the random access memory goes, the RAM, a component that is one thing that gives us the raw speed of the machine. Notice in this particular motherboard, we have something very special going on here. There's color coding. This is because this gives us what's called dual channel RAM capabilities. I'll talk all about RAM and dual channel in the RAM nugget of this course. But for right now, let me just tell you that what dual channel means is it can give us better speed between this RAM and another component on the motherboard called the CPU. Why we care about this is because when we're putting RAM on the motherboard and we're in, let's say, a dual channel configuration, we have to fill the slots that are the same color. So if we had 2 RAM chips only, that's all we could afford right now, we would put them in the 2 white slots. Once we can afford more RAM, we could then put 2 more in the blue slots. If we had a triple channel configuration, we might even be able to speed it up more between the RAM and the CPU, and there would be color coding for the triple channel. If you don't have different colored slots like this on your motherboard, don't panic. It just means that you have a single channel motherboard. So you can go ahead and fill up those slots and experience great performance. It just isn't as fancy as the dual or the triple channel communications methods. Now, what do we consider the brains of our PC? Well, it's the Central Processing Unit, or CPU. This is what's doing all the calculations, and as you might guess, we want as fast a CPU as possible so we can have a really speedy computing experience. We'll have a nugget on CPUs, of course, but I just wanted to show you on the motherboard there will be a socket to house your CPU. In addition to the CPU and the PCI slots and the RAM slots that we've taken a look at, your device is also going to have what's called a chipset. They call it a chipset because it'll be these two chips, one up here that's called the northbound chip and one down here that's called the southbound chip. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as Northbridge and Southbridge, which is funny to me because I'm from Massachusetts and there's a Southbridge, Mass and a Northbridge, Mass. But anyways, what's going on with these chips is they control certain parts of the system. For instance, classically, the Southbridge chip is going to control things like PCI slots, USB functionality, hard drive functionality, BIOS functionality. And the northbound is going to handle communications between like the CPU and the RAM. And what else will we see when we're looking at the motherboard? Well, we'll see the CMOS battery, and we discussed that in our BIOS nugget in this course. There's plenty of power connectors because we need a power supply, and then we need to connect this power supply to the motherboard. There'll be connectors for fans, and then there'll be a bunch of front and top panel connectors. This is for stuff that's going to be on the exterior of the case of the PC that we're going to directly interact with. What would that be like? Well, how about USB ports? Sure. How about an audio connector so we can plug in speakers? How about a power button to turn the whole thing on? A little LED to show that there's power? Drive activity lights. Maybe your computer has a reset button, and that's going to need to connect to the motherboard as well. And so you and I now already will never look at a motherboard the same way again. We look at this motherboard and we immediately see things like the CPU, the CMOS battery, the PCI slots. We see that it's got to be dual channel memory capable. What was that? There was a Tim Allen show. Tim the Toolman Taylor, I think he was called, and he would discuss like, oh yeah, look at this. Yeah, very manly motherboard. Even though it's named Mother. Okay, back on track. So we have this motherboard, and one last thing I want to emphasize to you about this. We're going to see this as we move through this course together. There's all these different speeds that are possible. Think about it. The CPU, we're going to see there's all kinds of speeds when it comes to the CPU. The RAM, there's going to be all kinds of speeds that are possible. The different PCI expansions that we add will have all kinds of different speeds. The USB connections that we connect will be at all different speeds potentially. And there's another speed that we need to know of with motherboards, and that's called the bus speed. It's called a bus because it's moving information from one part of the motherboard to the other. I suppose that's why they named it that. And there will be different buses inside here and different speeds as information is being moved from one part of the motherboard to the next. So yet another component of this glorious thing called the motherboard is buses and bus speeds. So in this nugget, you and I dissected, as promised, the motherboard, and we saw some very important components that are going to be on there. As we move throughout this course, we'll interact with those components, and you'll literally see right before your eyes as we insert components into one of the slots on the motherboard. I sure hope this nugget was informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.